So right now I'd like to introduce Mary Nell Wooden. She's one of the Arts and Heritage Development Council board members, and she will introduce our speakers.
Well, it's a real treat for me to be able to introduce to you my friend John McDonald. And there's so many things that one could say about John, but I'm not going to say any of those things. I admire him so much for his creative ability. He is a masterful teacher. He's an actor. He's a playwright. In fact, I've told him a number of times after I've seen his production that he's my very favorite playwright. But I admire John most for being a visionary. And most people don't think of John as a visionary, but that's the thing that I admire him most for. He came to Clarksville, Tennessee about 23 years ago, and he saw an old movie theater that had seen better days. It was shuttered, it was filled with pigeons, and he had a vision that that could be Clarksville, Tennessee's little bit of Broadway. And he has persevered over the years, and he has turned that theater into a true gem for Clarksville, Tennessee. It's one of our greatest quality of life features, the Roxy Regional Theater. And so that's a great asset, and probably, in my mind, one of his greatest accomplishments. And so it's with real pleasure that I present to you my friend, a wonderful playwright, John McDonald.
Sorry, Nell, I don't know how I can live up to that, so I won't try. I want to start this. I feel like the proverbial dog in the manger with all these illustrious people, and what people like Pat Webb and Canervo and Chris have done for Clarksville to have this event is just absolutely glorious. I want to start with a piece from S.N. Berman, wrote a wonderful comedy called No Time for Comedy. The two characters, Philo Swift and Gaylord Esterbrook. You'll know who they are when I point to them. Gaylord Esterbrook. Seems to me like I've heard or read that name someplace. What do you do? I write plays. Yes. I have a hobby too. What I meant was, what do you do for a living? Write plays. Anything wrong? No, nothing. You'll pardon me, but it does seem a little trivial for a grown man. Well, perhaps I'll grow out of it. What do you do? I'm on Wall Street. Where's that? I don't know, but my chauffeur finds it every morning. After you get there, what do? Buy and sell stocks and bonds. Surely not for a living, and not a bad one. When stocks go up, I make a little money. When they go down, I make even more. That's all you do? Well, yes. Well, who knows? Maybe you'll grow out of it too. Here's hoping. I was not kindergartened or preschooled or educated in any way that would promote my being here in front of you. We were the richest family in the poorest neighborhood in Memphis, Tennessee. The first, second, and third grades were all in the same classroom. So I got a third of an education, I'm sure, but much loved by the nuns that taught us because we were the only family that had a car. So we were trafficking in the nuns wherever they needed to go. Then we had to move because everybody moved because our black brothers were then moving into the neighborhoods. So we all had to get up and move. And we moved outside the city limits, and I was in the school then for the second grade where the boys and girls were separated. And I remember wandering up to the second floor and being reprimanded thoroughly for having gone to the girls section of the school. We moved again, And I was now in the 3rd grade, and my mother had the audacity to produce another child, making me no longer an only. I got ringworm, we moved again, and I failed the 3rd grade. I repeated the 3rd grade again, and the nun who had failed me in the 3rd grade, asked myself and the other boy who had failed in 3rd grade to stay after school, substitute teaching that day. And terror, being told at lunch, stay after school. So we stayed after school, and Sister Bernard Joseph, who resembled a horse, proffered Billy Anderson and myself a set of rosary beads and complimented us on how well we had taken failing in 3rd grade and repeating it. Due to the ringworm and not being an only child and moving so many times, I developed an imagination that was away from the norm, absolutely, totally away from the norm. And a number of people in Memphis honored that, as I try to do at the Roxy with young people, try to accolade the strangeness and the oddities that are not always following the norm as people would like. So in New York, I produced a number of plays, showcase versions for actors to succeed in. Plays like Schnitzler's La Ronde, Ennui's, Ring Around the Moon. These were all, I guess you would call them vanity productions. You produce these plays and you hope that something's going to happen. My friend John Sheehan and I realized that old plays weren't going to work. So I remember we got a copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray, and it was a cold winter night. And we both had copies, and we were underlining and writing down what we thought was important about this book. We also had a friend that did wonderful slide work, wonderful slide projections. So we incorporated the idea of slides and actors and Lawrence Alma-Tadema's huge, beautiful paintings and a book of rooms. So when you talk about a room, the room would appear as a slide. It was absolutely beautiful, and it was of no value whatsoever. Because the definitive Dorian Gray had been written by Peter Schaeffer, so why do we bother? Then, lucky enough, as Mary Nell said, coming to New York, a wonderful woman named Peg Daniel came to me for the bicentennial, and she said, "Will you write a skit? Will you write a skit for the bicentennial?" I said, "Oh, well, sure." She said, "I'll write it with you." I said, "Well, sure, we'll do that." Peg didn't write it, and I worried about it all one summer. In the interim, somebody had said to me, "Will you write for Monday a skit for Leadership Clarksville?" It's Friday. Monday. It doesn't happen that quickly. Brilliance only comes in little short drafts and about 20-minute segments at best. So I wrote this play, Till We Meet Again, and they gave me the first city council meeting. And at the first city council meeting, 90% of the laws and that were made had to do with slavery. All slaves must be in the house by 10. They must carry a lighted lantern. They cannot cross through neighborhoods. That's the meat of the piece. So I culled a few things that I thought might be passable. And I had a wonderful Melva Boyd, so wonderful African-American singer and performer. And I used her in it, that she was telling a child while she sang this wonderful hymn about the laws that had been enacted at this first meeting. And I sent it to the city council. The city council reminded me that I had left out a character in it. I'd left out a very essential person, maybe the mayor or someone like that. And I had to go back to the script and write in on every page a line indicating, well, he's not here right now, we expect him in a minute. The next page, he'll be here soon. He's got a very valuable thing that he's doing. The next page, you know he has that prize pig, and if he doesn't get that pig back, he's in lots of trouble. So it goes on and on and on, and finally at the end, there was an actual pig, and it was brought in, and when you touch a pig, it makes noise, and then he said, the last line of the play was, he walks in with a squealing pig and says, "Am I late? Did I miss anything?" The audience that night for the bicentennial did not find it as amusing as that area of the room did now. From that, I thought, well, I could write some more plays. I loved the idea of a Tennessee waltz. I knew a family whose name was Waltz. So I thought, oh, gee, I have a grandmother who used to answer the phone all the time and declared that she wasn't there for the bill collectors. And she would use different voices depending on who these callers were, you know, and I didn't want to just go through that litany of things. And I wrote about, she was a famous shoplifter and was very good at it, and would send me back into the stores and say, take this back, buddy, we don't want it. And I thought, gee, why did she want a box of golf balls? Nobody I know in our family plays golf, but I would take them back, and they would give me money, and I would take it to my grandmother. And I wrote this in a play. She would also take holy cards and put them in all of the envelopes of bills with a dollar bill. And so you can imagine the people receiving this. She owes a couple hundred, and they got a holy card and a dollar bill. I think it kept off the bill collectors for a while. What she used to also do is she would borrow a car for a day to test drive it, and then she'd go around to all the people that she owed money to and drop off checks or bounce checks and go around, and then she'd deliver the car back the next day saying she didn't want it. I'm coming to Clarksville. Saw in Nashville a hotel called the Sam Davis Hotel, and then saw that statue of that young man, and then heard the story, and then a lovely, wonderful actress and a wonderful writer, Wanda McNabb. We would get together on a periodic basis, and we wanted to tell the story of this boy, but I thought, because I was so witty and so clever, and that Coffin and Hart had done a script where they wrote all the scenes backwards, kind of explaining who a person was by starting at the end and retelling the beginning. So we would get together on Saturdays, and then we would call actors to come, and they would come to the theater, and we'd do scene 5. And we'd realize that this was that, and this would change this, and blah, blah, blah. And I think the script turned out rather well. It was rather large and imposing. I think at one time, I'm talking about one of the scripts that I wrote, Heading South, Going North, Barry Kitterman said it was a pageant. And he didn't mean that as a compliment. We had produced The Christmas Carol a number of times, and with different versions. And everybody had tinkered with it and just played with it so much. And I thought I had invented a style that teachers often use. You know, they open the book up and they say, once upon a time, there was a little train going up the track, and the train said, and they changed their voice, oh, I have to get off this track, says the train. Well, someone had given me an annotated version of Christmas Carol that Charles Dickens had actually underlined all the pieces that he would use to read when he read the script for people, when he was famous for reading. He also said that when he wrote, he couldn't read, and when he read, he couldn't write. And I know that. It's a different mindset. It's a different, I know when I'm acting in a play or directing a play, I can't write anything. And I know that when I'm writing, I can't act in anything, because that's the way the mind works. So we had produced a number of plays at Christmas. We had produced a number of plays, but never a Christmas show. And we had done a number of various authors' versions. But I got this Dickens from the Morgan Library, facsimile, and from that culled a script from all the things that Dickens wanted to have in the script. Following the master, this is what you want, this is what I'll do. So the first time we presented it, it was with 5 other actors and myself, and they hated me. They hated me because they had so much to do. If they were off stage, they were changing hats and putting on different clothes, and they absolutely hated me. And the worst part of it is that my parents were coming into town for Thanksgiving, and that was the last meal we all had together, and it was short by about 10 minutes, the script. It needs to be an hour 15 at least. The children getting off the buses, getting into the theater, sitting down, that's about 7 minutes, and then leaving, that's another. So you have 15-minute leeway, but the show was too short. So I looked at the text and I thought, oh, well, I will use the old Joe and the cleaning lady scene. Well, they had no one to play it. Everybody at that particular point in the play was off changing costumes into being something else, but Bob Cratchit wasn't, and neither was Nephew Fred. So I said, Bob, can you learn these lines for tomorrow? 5 lines, looking at these lines. Oh gosh, I'm a woman. I said, yes. Let's go find a dress and a mock cap. And Nephew Fred said, and I have to be a bum. You can wear what you're wearing. It's fine. Put a patch over your eye and no one will know the difference. Now, there were 2 people that had not been in the production because of various reasons. We had substituted some people. And so when this point of the show happened, all of a sudden, there are about 25 people in the wings, little children, having never seen this event take place, of Old Joe and Mrs. What's her name? I can't think of her name. She has a name, but she's a guy with a cap on his head. So we filled the time gap that way. We had produced all of the plays that are studied in the school system. We had produced Glass Menagerie 4 times. We've done Belle of Amherst 3 times. We've done Anne Frank 4 times. And one day at Borders, I looked over to the rack there of required reading and saw Jekyll and Hyde. And I saw that book there. I thought, that's a great book. Let me go to the video section and see what somebody's done to it. And I got a wonderful version with Frederick March from Paramount, directed by Reuben Mamoulian, and a Spencer Tracy, directed by Fleming, who directed Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. And it was on one disc back and front. And one evening, I put it on about 8 o'clock, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd seen both films. Well, what had happened is, MGM bought the Paramount version. They bought the version that has the prostitute and the fiancé. And the Paramount version, 1933, it's before the production code, so Miriam Hopkins shows lots of flesh. But they don't show so much flesh with Spencer Tracy. But they had just taken the script and maybe made a delivery boy a flower girl. It had the same bit of business of Hyde tripping a waiter, jumping over a sofa. These bits were in. So I thought, you know, I better read this thing. I think I should read it. So I bought a copy of it at Borders, and it's what I call, and don't be offended, it's what I call toilet reading. You have 3 pages to a chapter, and you can finish that while you're not doing anything. And, you know, each chapter was 3 pages, 4 max, and got together with some young people and started workshopping. And dear Lou Tatum, God bless his soul, he really is an educator from Austin Peay who kind of took the Roxy under his wing and played so many wonderful parts. I think it was like written in his unwritten contract that he would always leave at intermission so he could come back and teach at Austin Peay. Hence, he's Polonius, he dies. And he's Julius Caesar, he dies early on. And he's Banquo, he dies really soon. And then after he retired, he came back and did King Lear, who doesn't die until the very end. So, the last chapter of Jekyll and Hyde is this massive tome of about 30 pages, at which time I sent it to Dr. Tatum. And he had this wonderful suggestion. He said, break that chapter down and play, after a scene takes place, what is talked about in the chapter. Genius, brilliant. The actor playing Jekyll and Hyde had a moment behind a chair. Jay Doolittle was sitting in the chair, and Jay's narrating, like a little engine that could, his confusion about Jekyll and Hyde, while the actor is going from left to right, playing the character. On one side, he's wearing a top hat, and he had some prosthetic teeth in his mouth. And on the other side, the hat was off, and he had this really wonderful smile. He never wore the prosthetic teeth in that sequence. You just assumed that they were there. It was absolutely brilliant. So from that success of the Jekyll and Hyde, realizing that it had a duty as well as an obligation to people like Robert Louis Stevenson and Stephen Crane to actually produce the work the way they had intended it to be, without a magic lantern show or without a lot of googly gawk. Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage. I looked for a script of that, and I found an edition which said, an older gentleman in a rocking chair is now recounting his youth. Well, Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage is about a young boy who lives the Civil War. And so with a group of young people, young teenagers, we would take the scripts, read this, read that, underline this, underline that, and we'd get together periodically, and I could hear who should say what and how they should say it. It calls for a woman and playing the mother and the girlfriend, and then she disappears out of the book. So if you know about Mary Walker, who was in the military, first woman to get the Congressional Medal of Honor, she happened to be in Clarksville when Lincoln was assassinated. She also was in Washington when the conspirators were executed. She wore pants underneath her short dress, so I rather invented that character, not saying who she was, so a woman then could narrate some of the piece. The biggest and the saddest piece is All Quiet on the Western Front, and that was so wonderful to find out that Paulette Goddard, the wonderful actress, she had married Eric Maria Remarque, and she held the rights to the estate of All Quiet on the Western Front. And then, of course, you watch those films, and the films always have the young boy reaching for the butterfly, and then he's shot because he reaches for a butterfly. But once you read the book, you realize that the weight of the war, and he loses all of his friends, that what he does is, he says, it was a beautiful day, and I stood up. He just stood up. And in standing up, he's shot. So all of the scripts, well, Jekyll and Hyde wrote one line. He said, do you have a key? He says, yes, here's a key. And I said, oh, you've got it. Let's change that. Do you have a key? Yes, I have a skeleton key. I thought he just needed that little bit of horror in it, you know. Supposedly, Robert Louis Stevenson's wife said, it's too bloody, it's too awful. And I know we went back to the paper and made it even more bloody, even more awful. I've also done some scripts about Dorothy Dix. I've done that twice with my good friend and lovely actress. And Ted Jones suggested that, Dorothy Dix. And there was a Miranda character in it. It's a black set of books that Dorothy Dix wrote, which I'm sure are horrifying now, because Miranda had lots of advice on marriage and a lot of things that she had to say. One of the things I remember is that she said, every man ought to have an auto. You'll know where his hands are, and he's got to make money to buy the gas. So it's the greatest invention for a married woman is to have an automobile. So in incorporating that character in Dorothy Dix Speaks, I made Miranda the other self of Dorothy. So when Dorothy had to be the Southern Belle and say all the right things at the right time to this very chauvinistic interviewer, Miranda just spoke out and said what she wanted to say. Then, last but not least, Jackie Littleton turned me on to a woman whose name was Nora Wetzel, who was a photographer. Jackie said, whatever you do, don't make her a lesbian. I thought, there's nothing I can do about that. Either she is or she's not. But they were putting a statue up in the public square, and I did some research. Jackie loaned me the information. I got some wonderful photographs. And in the play, the lovely, vivacious Leslie Green played Nora Wetzel. In the Stephen Crane, the character says, "Damn hell," when one of his soldier friend dies, and he also says, "Jackass." And I had a teacher come and shake their finger at me for incorporating Stephen Crane's "damn hell" and "jackass" in the script. So the first thing that Nora Wetzel says when she comes on stage is, "Damn, hell. Don't be surprised. Dams hold back water, and hell's a place you don't want to go." So I'm going to read a little bit of this one-woman show. She's supposed to hold up pictures of what she's talking about. And I hope I haven't gone too far. I'll be done soon. And I'll have to look at it because I don't know it by heart. Do people still say, "one dark and stormy night"? Well, it was a gray one at that. And it had rained all day long. Not the kind of rain that brings the Cumberland up to your doorsteps, but rather the worst ones that seep into your bones and you ache in places you didn't know you had. Joints, knees, toes, wrists. I even hurt my jaw sometimes. All three of us heard the gate creak and answered the gentle knock. We never got callers, never. Oh, the neighbors would borrow a cup of milk from time to time, which they never thought to return, or we'd a cup of sugar, much needed but long forgotten. But that evening, Miss Addie Wilson stood smiling at our door. Here is her picture. Hand-fitted by yours truly. I've colored her dress and hair bow ribbon blue. It really was yellow, but the blue was to match her eyes. For Addie Wilson had eyes as blue and as wide as the sky. As she stood there talking to the three of us, I heard nothing she said. Her lips were moving, I remember that much. But she looked so much like the porcelain doll I had sunk in the bottom of the Cumberland that I thought it had reincarnated into Addie Wilson. Neither cloying nor patronizing, rather friendly and funny, bright, charming, self-effacing, ingenuous to her own detriment. She was from the Presbyterian Church, which I, as a good Catholic, knew nothing about. For I had stopped going to church after Papa's death, but this doll had come to life at my doorstep. Mother poked me in the ribs, Kate offered tea, and it dawned on me, with bruised ribs and tea being offered at night, that I should ask her and the gentleman who chaperoned her into the house. What you see is not always what you get. I'd missed Reverend H.G. Price altogether. He was highly unmemorable, his face obscured by a large black hat and a clerical collar. He had large hands gloved in kid who'd never left his side. Addie was bubbly, like pink champagne. She was laboring to start a mission school and using the mixed-race families on Spring Street as her first charges. Addie couldn't get a foreign mission. Delicate health prevented her from passing the rigorous physical demanded by the Presbyterian Mission Board. We became fast friends. I went to the Presbyterian Church. I really liked it. There was no fire and brimstone, just good common sense and a great deal of human kindness, grace, and understanding. We were not pressed for money. I was hooked. My friendship with Addie grew with time. Church suppers turned into picnics at the cave, tea parties, birthdays, and promenades. Oh, you'd need someone's house, and then you'd walk by 2s or 3s or 6s to Dixon Sadler's drugstore for soda pops, strawberry phosphates, or vanilla egg creams. You can buy anything there. My cousin, my adopted sister Kate, worked at McNeil and Edwards and brought home some scraps, which Mother turned into quilts or pillows or whatever. It was salvaged, destined for the dustbin, but retrieved by Kate. Addie had asked me to go with her to a party at Rudolph Haas. I had to laugh. In the picture of our house, you can see Rudolph Haas Tobacco Warehouse next door. There were enough scraps of a green shade brocade, which in the right light, dark, matched pretty well the dress I already owned. But it was one of the summer variety, and the Haas party was for New Year's Eve. So Mother and my cousin Kate made a short jacket with a wide sash, big cuffs, which was very popular at the time, and matching purse of green shade brocade. Addie always wore yellow. I don't think I can remember ever seeing her in the same dress twice. I must have, but I don't remember. I never saw any of her dresses on the rack at M.L. Cross's clothing store. I think they came by post from Louisville, French-made. I don't think she cared much for dresses, shoes, bows, gloves, or hats. She only wore them in modesty or for warmth. My dress code had been dictated black or black and white since Father died. This was to be my personal coming out party. It wasn't uncommon to walk down Franklin Street and see the skirt you were wearing being mirrored by someone else. You merely crossed the street to avoid detection. This was true of hats, coats, and all manner of apparel. However, when I walked into the Ha House, the sash, jacket, purse, and cuffs of my dress were a perfect match to the 6 pair of floor-length drapes hanging on the parlor windows. No one held back their snickers. I turned as red as beets. I turned on my heels. I ran all the way home, tearing the dress in pieces as I ran. I threw myself in the Cumberland and drowned in shame like the porcelain doll over the mantel. My body was never found. The end. No, that's not what happened, but it makes a good story. The truth is, Addie followed me out. She grabbed my hand. She had such sympathy in her eyes that I could no longer be angry as a hornet. She began to laugh so hard I could only laugh as well. We giggling girls running down the street to her house. She took me into her house, 318 South 1st Street. The house was a hodgepodge. Mr. Wilson owned Swanee Wood Planing and Flooring Mill, a prosperous business at 25 Commerce Street. Addie was his bookkeeper. The business was just down the hill from where they lived. I say a hodgepodge, for no two sides of the house were the same style or design. Victorian plain style, Georgian classic, Renaissance revival, Gothic modern. Windows on one side did not match any on the other. Doors were open. Always doors were also never the same. Trim, moldings, floor patterns, spindles, stair treads, no two were alike. You see, Mr. Wilson was a businessman, contractor, builder, and salesman. He built Archwood, the K. Johnson House on Madison Street, and other formidable buildings and houses. He used his house as a prototype, showplace, bringing clients to look at possible choices for windows, dormers, and doors. There were always strangers at 318 South First, walking around, picking trim, inside, choosing metals. So Addie knew no strangers. For me, a person interested, or rather concerned with details, it was maddening. Anyway, she took me upstairs to her room and picked out a pretty yellow dress, which almost fit. We went back to the Ha House, and then she announced to everyone what a wonderful joke we both played on everyone. That was the only time I think she ever lied, but it was a white one. That was the happiest night of my life. I'd been the brunt of jokes before, but this time she had turned the tables and the chairs, and in fact all the furniture in the room topsy-turvy, as only she had the charm and strength of character to do. Next day, Mrs. Ha went back to McNeil and Edwards in a furor, demanding to know who had bought the rest of her seafoam moire. My cousin said no one had bought it. She didn't tell Mrs. Ha the truth, that she had absconded with remnants of her portieres. Mrs. Ha bought the other half of the second bowl, and I got to keep a very pretty yellow dress with a lace collar and a tiny ruche. I'm sure Mrs. Ha still has that bowl somewhere in her attic till this day. Now, with all that lack of symmetry, there was a curious synchronicity happening within the Wilson home. For Addie had identical twin sisters who dressed the same, but had no interest in proclaiming their peculiar and singular identities. You could be let in the door by one of them, passing through the dining room while the other set the table, and you turned your back to the other, or the same, would be stirring a pot in the kitchen while the other, or the same, was beating a rug in the yard. So it only made sense that Addie never knew nor recognized anything odd or different or strange, unnatural or uncommon. For her, all individuals were just that, individuals, windows, dormers, doors, people. She accepted them all. Mr. Wilson took 2 houses across the street for his twin daughters. They were in no way alike, the houses, that is. He promised to build one for Addie as well, way out there on Greenwood, if only she would give up the desire to be a missionary. But she was determined, as she was pretty. She combed the neighborhood of Spring Street to find any Oriental to teach her Japanese. But the Asians there, Korean, Chinese, and the like, had only one desire, and it was to assimilate. They would do anything to be able to speak American, which, as you know, is a poor excuse for English. Her father never gave in, so her mother paid for her tickets. Her father did what he thought was a helpful gesture. He sent off to the doily cart recording of the Mikado, 22 discs in all, back and front, thinking that would help her with her Japanese. The tickets were bought, teas were given, collections made for Bibles, bags packed, and farewells, and good luck parties thrown. I somehow had it in my mind that once getting on the train a few days later, that she would depart the same train in Japan. At her departure, I wore the yellow dress she had given me. I waved a white hanky and sobbed and cried so many tears that the train pulled away. I could hardly see myself home. I received 3 or 4 letters every other month, a blue silk fan with spindles made of white porcelain, a glass wind chime, and a box of paper lanterns, which I hung outside and lit with Christmas candles. The rains wilted them. And I thought, as foreign as those paper lanterns were to us here in Clarksville, Addie was to Kobe, Japan. As the First Presbyterian Church manual notes, it is a singular coincidence that both Miss Addie Wilson and Reverend H.B. Price, who were instrumental in organizing the mission for the Second Presbyterian Church, later went on as foreign missionaries to Japan, and that both died within a few years of each other at their post of duty in the land of their choice. I heard Madame Butterfly on the radio once. It was in Italian. What did they know of the Japanese? What did we? What did Addie? She died December 15th, 1908. But she was not buried here for a year and a month. Family identification, paperwork, red tape, and customs kept her from here. October 8th, 1909, she finally came to rest at home in the cemetery on Greenwood Avenue, where, ironically, her father wanted to build her a house. I don't know what she died of. I went into mourning for the final time. I cut my hair, and I changed my mind about life. The end.
Thanks, John. That was fantastic.
You're very kind.
Yeah. So we'll begin with our next session in about 10 minutes or so.